Welcome everyone to today's webinar, At-Risk Students, What Do I Do Now? This is part of Simple K-12's Classroom Management webinar series and is presented by Ruth Herman Wells. Ruth has been with us for a couple of webinars now, and so for those of you who have attended her other ones, you know how awesome she is and that she has a lot of great information. Just a little bit more about Ruth. She's a founder of Youth Change, which is one of the nation's oldest and prominent providers of classroom management training. She's also ranked number 3 in the top elementary education speaker in the United States, and this was by SpeakerWiki, which actually lists thousands of speakers, so being ranked number 3 is pretty awesome. We're very happy to have Ruth here, so thank you so much for joining us, Ruth. Following today's webinar, I will tell all of the attendees how they can receive a bonus free ebook by Simple K-12. Members of the teacher learning community, this is already available in your shared resources area, so you can find it there. And all of our non-members, please stay on after today's webinar and I'll go ahead and tell you how you can get it. We do have lots of great upcoming webinars, and these are all free to the public, so I encourage all of you to invite your friends and colleagues to join us for future Simple K-12 webinars. And before I pass the controls over to Ruth, I just have a few housekeeping items. I'm actually Grace Dunlap. I'm with Simple K-12, and if you have any questions during the webinar, please go ahead and submit them to me through GoToWebinar. I can get them over to Ruth following her presentation during our Q&A. We also have a back channel set up, so if you'd like to chat and take notes with other attendees, you're welcome to do so. All you need to do is go to simpleK12.titanpad.com/34. And we're going to go ahead and get started with a quick poll, find out a little bit more about you guys who are joining us today. So go ahead and let me know, what is your title? You should see the poll coming up now. Go ahead and lock in your vote. If you have to choose other, that's perfectly fine. Just go ahead and type in the GoToWebinar's questions box what other means, and I can read off a few of those titles. Let's see, most people have voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the results. Okay, so let's see. We have about 45% teachers joining us, 50% other, and 5% directors of some sort. So let's see, a few of the titles are counselors, technology specialists, district staff developer, instructional technology consultant, special education instructor. Lots of different titles, and that's wonderful. There's something for everybody to learn here, so I'm so glad that all of you could join us. Now I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, pass the controls over to Ruth, and then she can go ahead and take it away. All right, so welcome, Ruth.
Well, I'm glad to be back. Can everybody see the screen with the rather unhappy-looking little girl on their screen? Can everybody see that?
Not yet. I'm about to give you the controls right now, and then we should be able to, okay?
All right. Well, there we go. Can everybody see the girl now? Let's see. I'm going to tell you this. You can see my screen?
Yes, your screen looks great.
Well, given the job titles I just heard, you should all recognize this young woman. So I'm hoping that you can see her and that you already know her. And welcome to our workshop on at-risk students. My name is Ruth Herman Wells. I'm going to be your in-service day entertainment. And you're in good hands. I crisscross the country for the last 20 years helping folks work with unmanageable kids. I'm the director of Youth Change, and let's hope I can get the slides to start moving. They don't seem to want to work at the moment. Let me try one more time. There we go. And there's a little bit about Youth Change, and you can see that we really know your young people and that you're going to be well taken care of during this workshop. And I want to show you what we're going to cover. And boy, I got to tell you, Grace, I am not moving forward when I click move forward. I'll try a different way of doing it, but at this point, every time I click a slide, it does not want to move. We are
Have you
stuck
tried
in
double
the,
clicking? Sometimes it gets stuck.
Yep, I'm double clicking. I'm also trying to use the little tab here at the bottom, and that's working a little better, so I may just stick with that. All right. Well, I'm excited now to see the agenda since I worked so hard to get it to come on up. We're going to talk a little bit about why at-risk students struggle, but then we're just going to really jump in and get down to business and let me give you some strategies. So I'm going to be showing you the 4 kinds of at-risk kids, and they're listed there for you, and I'll be recapping them as we go so you don't have to really remember them. It will be recapped for you, but they're anxious and traumatized kids. There's what I call anti-school kids. There's unmotivated at-risk kids, and there's distracted at-risk kids. After we get those issues covered, I'm going to give you some strategies. I'm going to be introducing you to school skills training, meaning I'm going to be giving you wonderful methods for teaching the kids how to be students so that they have the skills, the motivation, and the attitude that you need them to have to succeed in school. We're going to wrap up with some awesome downloads. And if you look for this symbol when I show you strategies, every time you see this symbol, it means you're getting the item free in your workbook. And you're going to be real happy because a lot of the items are going to be yours when we're finished at the end of the webinar. We will save a few minutes for questions and answers. All right, now if I can make this go forward, there it goes. Let's talk about why kids struggle. And one of the first things I need to point out is that your training might not have kept up with the kind of kids you ended up with. So today, I'm not going to just teach your brain. I'm going to also teach to your gut, if you allow me that kind of a term there, because I think sometimes having a gut-level understanding of these youngsters is as important as having the intellectual one. So I'm going to start off with a quick little letter from a book called Dear Teacher. And it may kind of put you in the world of your kids and maybe convey more of what they're about than I could do with just pure words. So here's from the letter, from the book, Dear Teacher. What I can remember of my feelings at the time feels so bleak. I felt so pressured and alone. I felt dead inside. My parents were having marital problems, and that just piled on more anxiety and fear. I wanted school to be an oasis in the midst of the nightmares. Only they weren't nightmares. It was my daily life. Gestures some teachers make and consider routine might be the rays of hope a traumatized child sees shining through the bleakness. I can't multiply or divide without a calculator, but more important, I know how to add and subtract because of a first-grade teacher who gave me little plastic cards to count as I stood with my classmates who knew the answers off the top of their heads. A teacher offered me tools that giving up was not the solution. Making adjustments and discovering the choices was the lesson I was guided to understanding. Teachers may be lifelines for children in crisis. All I had left was school, my saving grace. I want you to know about me, the traumatized child who somehow survived. I'm not certain that the nature of trauma a child experiences is hidden. I think more often it's overlooked. Beautiful passage from the book Dear Teacher, edited by John Seryak, and that's S-E-R-Y-A-K. Maybe these children can be overlooked because we're not keeping teacher training up in terms of the kids that we have in front of us. So teacher training tends to lag the young people. Teacher training tends to be more geared for yesterday than today. Now, even though the passage I read focuses on trauma, it doesn't have to, at-risk doesn't have to mean a kid that's faced trauma, although it often does. And in fact, the term at-risk can mean different things to different disciplines. To court folks, it means at risk of reoffending or penetrating the justice system. To counselors, it can mean at risk of drug and alcohol. And certainly to educators, it usually means at risk of dropping out or failing or struggling seriously. We'll use that last term today for when I refer to at risk. So kids are coming back to school each September without the skills that they need to be students. And as you can see right here, most schools have no formal plan to train the kids to be students. That's not great for any kid. But for a kid that has burdens or challenges, we've already talked about trauma. It could be a homeless child. It could be a child in crisis. It could be language differences. There could be kinds of organic problems going on for the youngster, physical problems. There could be all kinds of issues that could help a child be considered or become at risk. And no matter what issue the child comes in with, we do not provide school skill training, and it's going to take a toll on these kids with the challenges at the most. So children that are struggling do what I call to self-train to become a student, meaning they're expected to figure it out on their own. And many of your at-risk students just aren't able to do that. So let's get into the 4 kinds of at-risk kids. Here comes group number 1. I'm going to spend a disproportionate amount of time on them because I think this kid takes a disproportionate amount of your time. Group number 1 is anxious and traumatized. This would include your work refusers, your kids that are mute. Some of your absent kids might fit this category. And I think there's a lot of them out there. And so that's why I'm going to go especially heavy on this youngster because you see so many of them. And you can see on the screen that I've already pointed out for you some of the kids that could fit in this category. I've mentioned some verbally. You can see that there's others. The idea here is that the burden they're carrying is so hard. That's why they can end up behaving problematically. There's an old Native American saying that you need to grieve a loss a full season. This part of your population of kids is lucky if they get 6 hours, never mind a full season, to cope with whatever's going on in their world. So what I need you guys to do now is to imagine or think back to when you were in crisis. It could have been a fire, a car accident, a death. Where did you go to deal with it? Probably a lot of you crawled into bed, you pulled up the covers over your head, and you stayed there until you could function. But a lot of your youngsters aren't allowed that opportunity. They're back in their desk in the classroom, pretty quick after a beating or a rape or sexual abuse or something of that sort. When you see the kid with the hat over their face and the heavy clothes in summer, and they're kind of like turtles, they've pulled in their arms, their legs, and what you see is this hard shell exterior. That's the kid extracting recovery time wherever they happen to be, because unlike you, they can't crawl into bed and stay there in many instances. They got to go to school. When you think back to the crisis, whether it was the death or the car accident or whatever, I want you in your mind right now to think about what skills did you lose during the crisis. Some of you couldn't find your car keys to save your life. You couldn't button your jacket. You couldn't tie your shoe. And if at the peak of the crisis your boss or an authority figure had said to you, you need to function better, how many of you could have just gotten those skills back? And I'm sure a lot of you are saying, well, no, I was already doing the best I could. If I could have functioned better, I would have. The same is true of the kids. Here's the words from a girl named Arlene. I felt so different than the other kids at school. I was sure if I wasn't careful, they'd be able to tell about me. I was very careful to be quiet, never raise my hand, not draw any attention to myself. I tried to be invisible. To get you in the world of Arlene and these other anxious and traumatized kids, I want you now to think of the 5 things on earth you care the most about. And if you're like the groups that I get when I go out to schools and conferences, your answers, I've got them kind of memorized at this point. You're going to tell me that you care most about family and your pets and your home and things of that sort, your religion, things like that. Well, how many of you would tell the secret of what was going on at home if you knew you would lose all these things you care about? And again, if you guys were live in front of me and I could see your hands easily, you'd be able to tell me that you wouldn't tell the secret, you would keep it. And the same is true for the kids. And so your job becomes, you've got these kids with all these problems, but you don't know exactly what's going on with them. And you sure don't want to end up being one of the teachers ragging on that kid for no homework or some other problem. And then later in the day, you're in the teacher's lounge, and you overhear the school counselor talking, and she's letting people know that Joni is struggling today because last night the sheriff spent the entire night in the family home attempting to extricate the father from the home. The father was attempting to kill the entire family. And, of course, at that point, the teacher says, but if I only knew what the child was going through, I'd have, been different. But you always have to act as if you knew what was going on. So if you do discover it later, you won't feel bad about how you interacted. The image I'm going to give you on this is, must you see the skunk if you can smell it? Or is smelling the skunk sufficient? So these kids are prepared to die to stay safe. Are you prepared to die to get them unstuck? Probably not, because you've got all those other kids and all those other responsibilities. So let's look at what should you do, and we've already sort of started talking a little bit about what you should not do. And notice all the strategies you're getting in this section, as long as you see the words anxious and traumatized up there, all the strategies you're getting are for only this population. They will not work well with other populations. And here's some numbers just to show you what a huge, huge, huge population this is. And these are widely accepted numbers replicated in study after study. So let's talk some about what to do. Can't give you everything I have because of our time frame, but I'm going to give you a couple of the greatest hits of my best strategies. So let's imagine that Sharon's dad's a truck driver. When this dad is on the road, this is a very functional young person. And when she's functioning well, you can really increase your expectations of this young person and decrease any accommodations that you offer her. Uh-oh, dad's back in. He's back off the road. Don't know exactly what's going on at home because if I knew, I'd have to report. But I can see in my classroom that this kid has really gone way downhill. So now what do? Well, now we want you to increase the accommodations you offer the youngster and decrease the expectations. So this is a dynamic, shifting balance. And for staff that say, but I have to treat all the kids the same, I have to be perfectly fair, this isn't going to dovetail well. But unfortunately, your kids are not all the same, and if you use one-size-fits-all interventions with these youngsters, you're going to find that nothing is working really well. So I understand for those of you that want to treat everybody the same that this is an issue. But again, if you want to be effective with this population, you're going to have to use different approaches with different young people. And so let me give you an example of another way to think about working with this youngster. I want you to imagine that you're going crabbing, which is something we do on the West Coast. We take our, and other coasts, I better acknowledge quickly, or we'll have angry comments there from folks around the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic Ocean, I'm sure. So you take your crab ring and you throw it into the water. And I did that with my crab ring, and I went to pull it in, but it got stuck on the ocean floor. So I pulled and I pulled and I pulled. Finally, I was cold, I was wet. I just threw down the rope of the crab ring, and in that moment it sprung loose. There's the image I give to you for working with this population. You can tug on them forever. They will never spring loose. And so they've learned by staying stuck at home that they can sometimes stay safe. And that stuck response comes into your classroom, and the kid can't just turn it off and say, well, I'm in school and they don't do scary things here to me. That staying safe response goes everywhere. So this population has 3 ways that they respond when you tell them to do something or ask them to do something. The first way is they can get stuck like the crab ring. You do have the option to tug and tug and tug and tug and push and push and push and push and to try to get them to capitulate. And capitulation, or caving in, is the second way this kid can respond. But it can damage the youngster, and again, you just heard in our example, what if the sheriff had spent the night in the family home? Another example is, what if the child is black and blue under their clothes? Do you really want to be pushing and harking on them? So it's an option, but it's a terrible option. The third way to respond to this youngster is the only way to respond, in my view, and that is acceptance. You throw down the rope of the crab ring, and you work to get acceptance from the youngster. So those three ways of what you should do are, the child can respond by getting stuck, by capitulating, or with acceptance. You're going to work for acceptance. Here comes a couple strategies for using acceptance. For little kids, you can make a a traffic sign like you see when you're in your car. Red, yellow, and green are on this mock-up of a traffic light. Red becomes bad work day, yellow okay work day, and green is good work day. And you make a little pointer that's movable, and the child can move the pointer and show you what kind of day they're having. And I promise you they'll work very hard for you on days that they're in a good work day, and if you give them space on the yellow or the red day, and you use your own judgment on what that means to give them an accommodation. For older kids, you can simplify it to just good work day and bad work day, although if you have kids that won't use words, to make a little postcard or something that they can flip to good and bad work day is going to be important. And in a second, I will talk about, will they take advantage of you on this? If you give them this accommodation, will they rip you off? I will talk about that on the next slide, which we're just seconds from going to. Because I want to take a second to point out that if you use these methods of accommodation with this fragile young person we're talking about, they're going to go very rapidly from being less tied in knots and doing nothing. They're going to start to move step by step by step towards being more flexible and more able to do things. The image I give is they can go from Miss Priss to Miss Piggy. Here's a technique that I've used where I've seen that. These kids are so scared of making mistakes. So teach them everybody makes mistakes. And then you make a mistake. So you want to trip or drop your pen or do something goofy, because humor is so great at working around how tense and tied up in knots they are. And then you can teach them that making mistakes is normal, and that kind of helps combat some of the fear they have, because making mistakes at home can be kind of scary for some of them. So what else do you need to know about this population? Well, remember, the interventions you're getting now are just for this population right here, just for anxious and traumatized. And they're not going to be useful and could fall apart with other students. We're getting strategies here that are targeted for anxious and traumatized. But you may be wondering, hey, if I use these strategies of accommodation and I work towards acceptance, how do I know this kid won't take advantage of me? Well, I can guarantee you, since I'm a counselor, that if you use these strategies with this population, you're their lifeline. You may be the only sane, sober, kind, humane adult in this kid's universe. Why would they take what little energy they have left and use it to jeopardize their lifeline? It makes no sense whatsoever. After Katrina hit New Orleans and people took other folks into their home, did the rescued people take advantage of the people that saved them, or did they have an enormous amount of loyalty and appreciation? And, of course, the answer is they had enormous loyalty and appreciation. And that's what they're going to have for you, because you may be the only sane, sober, kind, humane adult in their universe. So what's a good goal for this population only? Not every other population, but anxious and traumatized, to work as hard as they can on days that they're able. Is it fair to ask any more of any of us? And so that's a wonderful goal to keep in your mind for this very fragile youngster. Group number 2 of our 4 kinds of at-risk kids coming right at you right now, and that is anti-school students. And anti-school students are kids that say, all my problems at school is that stupid teacher and that principal. It's got nothing to do with me. So who are these youngsters? Well, there's a long list right here you can read, and I'll read a few of them to you. This youngster tends to blame others for their problems. They can manipulate. They're defiant, disrespectful. They may be bullying. Now, they don't have to do all these bad behaviors, but you're starting to get the idea that this is a disruptive youngster. Can be a sharp kid. Doesn't have to be a real sharp kid. Often is, though. They question the rules. They're very negative. They're very non-compliant. And they behave this way because this is the way they're wired. This is what they do. And so using ordinary, everyday, one-size-fits-all techniques with this youngster won't work really well. We're going to have to use special techniques for this youngster, too. And so let's take a look at some of those special techniques. So I'm going to give you strategies to use and strategies to avoid. And so some to use include making them part of the system so they won't disrupt the system, because they love to blame everybody else and say it's all about the system. So here comes a fantastic intervention you're going to absolutely love, and I'm going to see how many of these cool interventions I can squeeze in on this population. But we have so many, many, many more resources for you on this youngster on our website, almost always free, hundreds of articles, interventions. So even though I'm just giving you a taste, you've got a place you can go right after the webinar to start seeing so much more. Here comes one of the interventions that people adore when I teach at live conferences and at schools where I have people's faces that I can see. So this intervention works best if it's done by the principal or counselor, but teachers, you could use this yourself. I'm going to imagine, though, that we're going to have the principal use it because it's an easier way for me to teach it to you. So let's say that Bobby says, all my problems at school are Mrs. Brown, the teacher. And the principal has Bobby in her office because Bobby's gotten in trouble for the 4 millionth time of being defiant, disruptive, bullying, that kind of stuff. And when Bobby says it's always Mrs. Brown, the teacher's fault, the principal can reach into her desk drawer and pull out a quiz and say to Bobby, you know, it just so happens I have a quiz right here. You can show me how terrible a teacher Mrs. Brown is. Now, we do want to have Mrs. Brown's permission to use this device, by the way. And Bobby is going to be thrilled to get involved with this little quiz. It's called Rate the Teacher. First question is, comes to school every day, even Mondays and Fridays? Second question, gets all her work done, even the stuff she doesn't like, and goes on from there. And as you can imagine, Bobby's going to say, yeah, she's always here. I love a sub in that classroom. Bobby and the principal get to the bottom of the quiz, and the principal can say, look, you know, according to you, Mrs. Brown, I know you think she's a lousy teacher, but she's doing the job teachers are supposed to do. And Bobby's going to be yelled, well, so what? And the principal reaches back in her desk drawer, pulls out a second quiz. It's called Rate the Student. And Bobby is now going to score himself on the identical items, and he's going to have a tough time rating himself very highly. And after he's had to give himself less than stellar marks on that second quiz, the principal can say, I know you don't like Mrs. Brown, and you never have to like Mrs. Brown, but according to you, she's doing the job that teachers are supposed to do. But also, according to you, you're not doing necessarily 100% of what we want of students. Could that just have a little bit to do with the results you get in school? Very powerful, very unexpected, very sideways, and that's always a good element to have to your interventions for your anti-school student. See how we're disrupting the stereotypical thinking that these youngsters do about school and about teachers and how it's never them. I'm going to see if I can squeeze in one more. This is the youngster that says, these rules are stupid. I don't want to have any rules. I don't want to follow. The rules are stupid. And notice, by the way, how these interventions can go up and down your grades. No exceptions. You should be able to adapt these across your grades, this one especially. So since we have this youngster, let's call this youngster Jeremy. who says that all the rules are dumb. Jeremy is now going to be the role play teacher. Can't give him money for a paycheck, but have some dynamite reward instead. Jeremy earns the paycheck by teaching a 5-digit number to the class, but this is a classroom with no rules. And you've got kids having gum and side-talking and walking out, and you assist Jeremy to realize he's never going to get the job done until there's rules, and to start making rules and attach Jeremy's name to the first rule. After a while, you retire Jeremy and get another acting out youngster up there as a teacher until you get the same set of rules you would have laid on your kids, but now the rules were crafted by your anti-school students and the rest of your kids, and have your kids' names attached to them. How much messing with the rules are they going to do? Probably not very much. And so you want to also be teaching school skills like, how often do I chew gum? How often do I be disrespectful to the teacher? How often do I refuse assignments? And so that you want this population to learn these school skills, and that when they get others, it gets them too. And so your goal with this population, you want them to understand that disrupting the system isn't going to be necessary. They're part of the system. You're going to work on that stereotypical thinking, and you're going to give them school skills and the understanding that getting others gets them too, and that should help rein them in and get them to succeed a bit more in school. Let's look at our third kind of at-risk student, and I'm betting when you think at-risk, you think unmotivated. And you may be right some of the time, but not all the time. For example, if you go back to our anxious and traumatized youngsters we talked about right at the start, if you remember them, these youngsters right here, that a youngster could have just been nervous about doing a task but had fine motivation. Could there be overlap between unmotivated and these other ones? You bet. So kids can fall into more than one category, but don't assume that every kid that's failing in school is unmotivated, because it may be true or may not be true. So even though you may think it, take the time to pause and look at the youngster and see which category or categories the child fits into. I'm going to be doing motivation for you visually in about, I'd say 3 or 4 minutes, when I just do strategy after strategy on all 4 groups. And so I'm going to ask you to hang on for some way cool motivational devices for K through 12, or actually pre-K through 12, in just a few minutes. Our final group of our 4 kinds of at-risk kids are distracted kids. These are the kids that have competition to school. The classic example would be the youngsters that maybe have to stay home and babysit, or parent their parents, or protect a family member from another family member, or they have a job they have to do to support themselves or the family, or they're homeless and being trundled about the city or the town that you work in. And so the answer on this one of what do I do, it's fairly simple for me to say it to you. It's a little harder for you to put into practice. You have to either go after that distraction or the time you provide your service. And so if you have an evening alternative high school for youngsters that are at high school age, there's an option for you. Many of you, especially from smaller communities, may not have that option. Those of you with children in middle and elementary school, your service may be provided only during the times when the distractions are occurring. So I know that although my information I'm giving you may be sound, you may have to work at either modifying the distraction or the time you provide your service. So providing an alternative time for your service may only work for some of you. The second option for what do I do is modify that distraction. How would you do that? Well, let's say that the youngster is being stuck at home babysitting because mom is, struggling with, being hungover or something like that perhaps, or for another reason. Maybe you get mom involved with a church group or a social service agency that could assist with the babysitting during school hours so that the youngster can more often or more readily or more regularly go to school. So The answer for your distracted kids is you modify that distraction or the time you provide your service. And so I want to really stress to you that before you choose your intervention, look for the reason or reasons that the child is struggling, and then pick strategies that match. And there's your 4 groups, and you may want to remember those, because if you don't, it might not go so great, because one size fits all interventions fits no one. And so again, another look at our 4 kinds of at-risk kids. It's just like when you use a special math book for kids with math, or you choose a different way to do reading because of a youngster's challenge. You walk around with that information in your mind all the time. Similarly, I really hope that some of you will take away these 4 categories and use them as regularly as other things that you do almost without thinking. What I want to do now is give you some strategies. I have to emphasize that these strategies can be used in a wide range of ways. They don't have to be on paper or on your screen in your classroom. They can be activities, they can be worksheets, they can be catchphrases. The way you take away these interventions is limited only by your imagination. Also, elementary folks, be very careful of saying, these are too hard for my kids. Well, especially the motivational interventions you're about to see are supposed to be hard. They're supposed to convey how much school is going to be necessary. So be careful about jumping to that conclusion, because I sure don't agree with it. And you want to be ready to adapt almost any of these interventions pretty readily. Make sure you watch for this logo right here, because that means whatever item you see here, you're going to see at the end of class and be downloading onto your computer. So you're getting lots and lots of goodies. So now that I've covered everything right here, let's look first at this funny looking thing over here. And some of you have already scoped it out, that it's text written backwards. What it says is, this is what life is like if you can't read. And it's also written for you down here as well at the bottom. You want the kids to experience the consequences of not getting an education before they go too far down that road of not getting an education. So these are great motivational interventions we're looking at, perfect for our group number 3, unmotivated students. But frankly, these are fine for everybody. And so this first intervention that we're discussing could be used as a poster. You could simply show it on your screen and on your PowerPoint projector, for example, or it could be a handout. But the impact of it is to hopefully convey what a huge difficulty that will be if you can't read. A fun follow-up is to have kids to ask kids to list all the activities that require reading. It's an amazing list. This next item that you can see right here says numbers count. Can you? And in the background, you can see some of the tasks that require counting. A follow-up activity would be to discuss those activities, or to add to that list, or to talk about, folks that kids have been in contact with that struggle to do some of these activities because they maybe didn't, come to math class or learn arithmetic as well as they perhaps could have. This next one is a luggage tag, and you can see that the inside is empty. What you're going to do with this one, if you decide to, say, print it out, which is probably its best use, is you're going to ask the kids to figure out where they're going by filling in the luggage tag. So you could have them figure out jobs they would like to do, places they would like to visit, cities they would like to go to, virtually anything. And then have them take a look at how much reading or computer skills, for example, are needed for so many of today's activities. Motivation really helps with almost any at-risk youngster. Now, for your at-risk and traumatized kids, that's group number 1. I'm not saying to pressure them, because we've talked about getting capitulation out of them is so unhelpful and makes them worse and creates more problems for them. But it is okay when the child is in a relatively stable place and doing relatively well to create a sense of urgency and a sense of importance, and see how that's different than pressuring them, which is sometimes what we're tempted to do. And the pressure can make them worse. The urgency can help. I like for the anxious and traumatized kids to use tactile kinds of techniques and to avoid brain techniques as much as possible. Unfortunately, they're often fairly sharp kids, and brain approaches can backfire because the kid is so well defended, and that's why art, poetry, anything that's not per se a brain activity can get you more mileage, and that's why using this one on your computer to let them, use a computer program to put their what they want on the inside there, or a traditional more arts and crafts activity would be great for the anxious and traumatized kids and others as well. You're going to get this intervention, not just a handout that you see pictured on the screen here, but you're also getting the lesson plan. So I didn't want to put the lesson plan up because it's not something very exciting to look at the moment, and I'll stay focused on the handout. But I just want, when you download everything at the end, to realize you're getting both, and that means there'll be many more activities included than this handout. This is an activity that's great for your anti-school students. That was group number 2. And it's another activity to help them discover that their bad behavior at school is actually not caused by that teacher or principal. You can use this device with any youngster that doesn't want to accept responsibility for their behavior, but it's really particularly intended for your anti-school students. And this is who determines the results you get in school. And here's the action and the results. And the kids have to determine who created the result and who just reacted. Again, the more you can get this population to accept responsibility, the more you're going to be able to get them to function at a level in the classroom where you feel like you're doing more than playing behavior comp. And a lot of you probably feel like that's kind of all you're doing is playing behavior cop with this youngster. And a lot of teachers say this is the 1% of their kids that takes 99% of their time. And I'm sure it feels that way. Hopefully this device is going to be of some help. Oh, these are very cool. If some of you are recognizing our posters, then I know what you've been watching on TV and what movies you've been seeing. These both were in Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I can't remember whether it was Wimpy 1 or Wimpy 2, but the hit movie Wimpy Kid used some of these posters. And then a lot of teenage TV shows that portray classrooms have our posters. So if they look familiar, that's probably why you've seen them. But they don't have to be used as posters. They can make great handouts and great discussion starters, and they're a fun way to teach what I call school skills. We expect even at-risk students to know how to ask for help, how to use the bathroom, and how to come in on time and be here every day. This long, long list of school skills, and you'll be seeing more on the next slide. But we don't necessarily actually teach them that on a planned basis. I know tons of teachers work it in, but we don't have a written down school skill training plan. If we did, we might be actually using this first intervention that I'm going to look at right here as something that we cover on the very first day of school, because it's that important. So in the first intervention, you can see youngsters saying that they didn't go to school because they had to go shopping, they missed the bus, they didn't know what day it was. What a fun, light way to start teaching how often you come to school. This could be a poster on your wall, it could be a slide on your PowerPoint projector, it could be a discussion item. It's really whatever you would like it to be. See these interventions as very fluid. This next poster is one of the ones that walks out the door the most from our offices, because people just adore it so much. It's such a chronic issue, isn't it? All the important stuff in class happens when you're in the bathroom. And then down at the bottom, it's kind of muddy on your screen. It's beautiful on the poster, though. And when you see it on a screen, other than this where I shrunk it, it looks pretty good. So I'll read it to you here because it's not so clear on this screen. It's just the stuff you'll need the rest of your life. You can just memorize these phrases and use them, or you could make a poster like this to be on your wall so that when one youngster says that they want to go to the bathroom for the 4,000th time in the hour, maybe the other youngsters will be pointing to the wall and going, and having the first youngster take a look at the poster. So it even can transition the accountability for this issue more to the group and less to just being something that you have to deal with. This one is, these items here are also focusing on more of those school skills we expect all youngsters to have, but we don't teach even to these challenged at-risk students, and you can see more of that long, long list, and even all these are not comprehensive. One of the things you may hassle the most is what to wear to school, and you can see there's the youngster whose pants are sagging. You can ask as a follow-up activity, name all the jobs and businesses that won't permit youngsters to come in looking like that, or their employees, I should say, to come in looking like that. And lots of businesses won't allow that. And so you can certainly talk about it's fine to dress that way in the community and at home and before school and after school. You want to, convey that it's not arbitrary, though, that you structure your site to be similar to the big employers in your region. And so a big employer in our region might be, I guess Intel. The minute Intel lets its computer engineers come in looking like that, we'll do it too at our school as well. Our rules are based on employee rules at major employers and other employers. This next one right here, even things like getting help, you got to teach it if you're going to expect it. And this one says, teachers are lousy mind readers. Want help? Ask for it. And so if you put something similar to this on your wall, or this becomes a phrase that the kids are acquainted with, you won't have to have that chronic problem of hassling about kids needing help. Your anxious and traumatized kids may not even be talking, never mind asking for help. So that shows you how important it is that you have some kind of an arrangement with, say, an anxious and traumatized youngster on how they're going to get help. Maybe it just means that they have a little sign or a little item that they hold up, but you're going to need some kind of a game plan for all your kids. But that would be one population with a special need. This next one, please, elementary folks, do not look at it and say way too hard, way too hard, way too hard. I know it's way too hard. That's the whole point, and you're going to see that on some of the other interventions. For kids that think they don't need school, let's have them fill in this online job application, or at least describe how they would fill it in. This one you could put up on your screen with your PowerPoint projector, or you could be on an iPad, for example, and the kid has to describe how they would complete each of these items. And so for students who believe that they're never going to need school, wow, if this is what an average job application could look like, maybe school has something to offer. And so resist the temptation to make it a whole lot easier. And this is one of your downloads. You certainly are welcome to put it into a graphic editor and to edit it to make it easier. I sure don't encourage that. You want the youngster to be a bit overwhelmed and to be thinking, wow, I guess I really do need school. So this is a great intervention for almost any of the populations we've talked about. It would be especially good with your anti-school youngster. It might motivate them to pay more attention more often if they were wondering, gee, how will I get a job if I don't learn this in school? This next one is another great one for your anti-school students, and it is called Who is the Problem Here? And I want to acknowledge you're not going to get these youngsters to immediately acknowledge that to immediately concede that they've got some role in their bad behavior, that we're going to have to do some work to get them to that point. And so that's why I'm giving you, a number of interventions that will help achieve that goal. Who is the problem here? Is frequently late to class, sometimes writes on desks, or intentionally damages school property. And the youngster has to pick true or false, and then they can rate themselves on the bottom. See how it takes the teacher or the principal out of the equation. It's between the youngster and a piece of paper. And so for the really resistant youngsters who react strongly and are oppositional to what teachers and principals are saying, this is a good intervention. And I think I've got time to squeeze in about 3 or 4 more. Let me see if I can get them in, and then we'll go right to your questions, and I'll be happy to spend as much time as you would like till we get to the top of the hour or there a little afterwards maybe on your questions. This is a fantastic intervention. Get paid great to arrive late. Looks like a help wanted ad. And it says, if you've made a career out of being late, we urgently need your special skills. Prior experience missing deadlines required. Strong commitment to missing Mondays preferred, but candidates who have the ability to miss Fridays may be considered. On-time applications not accepted. This is a school skill that all at-risk and all students need. Please do not assume that your students have skills that you think should be parent skills, or that are the parents' responsibility, or are basic skills that all kids have. Please don't assume that, especially with the population of at-risk kids we're focused on. If you want a skill, you're going to have to teach it first. Otherwise, you're adding, you're expecting them to do behaviors and skills they may not have been taught. We've got just a couple more here. These are amazing secrets bosses never tell. This really has a lot of impact on kids because it's a lot of the things you ask for in the classroom and that they see as irrelevant. I'll just read a couple. I don't want any excuses. I expect a good attitude. Gee, where have they heard that before? In the same vein, think teachers are tough. Wait till you meet your boss. And here's one that kind of pokes fun at grammatical errors. Look at all the varied ways there are to teach the kids to interact better with teachers, to see the value of their classes, to understand how what you're doing in that classroom translates straight across to that workplace. All of these devices could be on your screen using your PowerPoint, on the wall as posters. Some of them could also be discussion sheets. The way to use these are limited only by your imagination. Yes, you can reduce the complexity of the language for younger kids if you would like, especially on that first one. This is so cool. It's a student's guide to the care and heeding of teachers. And I'm going to read you just a little bit of it. Perfect for all your different kids. And it's teaching them how to have teacher interaction skills. Your teacher is equipped with a minimum of 2 ears and 2 eyes. Some models require glasses but can still meet minimum standards and spot a raised hand from across one classroom-sized space. Your teacher does not include optional mind-reading capabilities and can't magically determine when you need help. These are the kinds of skills that all kids need to learn to be students. I call them school skills, but your at-risk kid needs them more than any other kid. They've got so many challenges already. Even how to raise their hand and how to quiet down when class starts. On the side, you see additional interventions, and then here you see 2 very clear posters that you can use verbally. Give me 5, 2 eyes watching, 2 ears listening, 1 mouth shut. Just briefly mention the remote control. You bring in a TV remote control, and in order to talk, a student has to be clicked on. You can mute them, and so forth. The classroom will dissolve in laughter, and you'll have taught the kids an incredibly important school skill. So fun. Rhythmic clapping can be used by going dun, 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 dun. You teach everybody to clap together, and by the time the final beat is reached, then everybody should be quiet. On the Dragnet theme, you just have the kids go play the Dragnet theme on your computer, and everybody's to be in their seats and quiet by the time the theme from that TV show ends. And the last intervention, and then we're going to head to your questions. I don't teach while you eat. Don't eat while I teach. Feed your mind, not your face. Those are expressions you could take away if you would like. The next intervention will work for electricity. Meet the competition. Most jobs you can do without a diploma, a computer can do better. What great catchphrases. Follow up by asking students to identify jobs that computers are going to take over really soon or may already have co-opted. Things like taking the boarding pass from you when you go to the airplane terminal, paying your bills, things of that sort, automatic checkers. There's so many things that are becoming computerized. You can ask your kids what generation will they have their skills for. Will they be ready for the past generation or the one that's coming up? Very powerful stuff that any student needs to know, but especially your at-risk youngster. And these two motivation items were geared towards group number 3, unmotivated kids especially. Good for all 4, though. There was our 4 kinds of at-risk kids: anxious and traumatized, anti-school, unmotivated, and distracted. After class, you're getting so many goodies. And you can see that we've got all kinds of neat stuff for you. So we've got a big workbook with lots of the things you just saw. You also can find a free magazine on our website you get each month with more goodies for you. And there's free downloads and goodies all over our website. You're not alone in your classroom anymore because Youth Change is going to be there with you. So I'm going to turn the controls back over. Well, Grace is actually going to take the controls. I can't turn them over. But Grace is going to take the controls back, and she's going to be putting up a version of this last slide for you. So at the end of the workshop, you're going to be able to see where you want to go to get all the goodies. And Grace is going to come back on and help us get through the questions and answers.
Hi, Ruth. Okay, so I'm back, and thank you for a great presentation. Let me go ahead and switch the controls back to my screen. So give me just a second. Let's see here. Okay, and you guys should see my screen right now, so let me know if it's good. Okay, great. All right, so I do have a slide with all of Ruth's links, so I'll show that in just a second. I had a few questions come in that I'm just going to go ahead and answer real quick, and then we can get to yours, Ruth. So any questions that you guys have for Ruth, now is the perfect time for you to go ahead and submit them through the GoToWebinar's questions box. For those of you who are asking me about training time certificates and recordings to Ruth's past webinars, that is a perk of our teacher learning community. And so I've told a few of you, but I'll go ahead and tell everybody else now. We do have a great coupon available, so if you guys are interested in joining the teacher learning community, we have this special page here that will allow you to go ahead and apply a coupon code, which is great. And then you'll have access to your training certificates and all of Ruth's webinar recordings, plus all the other webinar recordings that we've ever done, and additional workbooks, ebooks, and classroom resources. And let's see, here's some of Ruth's contact information. And again, here's that special link for your coupon code if you're interested in that. And that's simpleK12.com/TLC/special. And here we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the links up while we go through some of Ruth's questions. So let's see here. We'll go ahead and pull this box up. I already see a lot of comments coming in, Ruth, that they loved your presentation, that you had lots of great ideas. I did see one earlier that I wanted to share with you. I thought this was pretty cool. Carol said that she had actually had a free day a month card. So her students could hand her a blank card once a month with no questions asked. And then she also had the option when she had to do something last minute. So I thought that was pretty neat.
That's a great idea. Absolutely perfect for group, the first group especially. The second group can play it a little bit, but that's a risk you take.
Yes, it is. Let's see here. And Jonathan had a question earlier. So I'm not sure if you did end up covering this or not, but I told him I'd ask. He said, what can be done then by teachers and schools to help kids get school skills? So this was asked towards the beginning of your presentation.
Well, Jonathan, there's curriculum that exists that other teachers have developed that shows you from pre-K through 12 what to teach when. And if you go to our website and search for oh, you could search under Mount Adams Curriculum or School Skills Curriculum, or shoot me an email at dwells@youthchg.com, which you can, it's not up on the screen at this particular second, but it will be up again. I can send you the link, and you can then print it out or look at it on your screen. I recommend that you have a school skills training time, whether it's at the start of a class or you set a block aside a week. The typical teacher loses 22 minutes of every 50-minute class period. I'm recommending you just take a small part of that time, train your kids on things like how often do I talk, how do I raise my hand, how do I sit in the chair, why is school important, how often do I tell the teacher no. If you would train your students proactively on that, you'll get back so much of that lost 22 minutes of instruction time. So Jonathan, shoot me an email. That would probably be the fastest way to send you the link, and then you can download it. Now, Grace didn't tell me if you were an elementary teacher, and she probably doesn't even know, but if you are, let me know that when you email me, and there's a really more expanded version for elementary teachers on our site, and both of these are going to be free, so you can pass them around and share them, and that's how you start school skills training, and maybe one day other schools will be following your model because the results are going to be really quite potent. You're going to be very, very pleased.
Okay, great. And he also did say that he hadn't thought of the idea of using the luggage tag, so I think he enjoyed that strategy as well.
And it can be fun to actually bring in a piece of luggage and start with that's a good, eye-catching device for kids, especially the distracted ones, is to come in with a piece of luggage and a luggage tag and have that be your opening salvo, so to speak. So that's a fun intervention all the way around.
Absolutely. And I do see that we are out of time, and I didn't see any other questions come in, just lots of great comments. So we'll go ahead and close out today's webinar. So thank you so much, Ruth, for another great webinar. And I do want to mention to Jonathan, I don't have Ruth's contact information on this page, but if you'll note the back channel link, simpleK12.titanpad.com/34, it is on there, so you can check out all of these links, her contact information, as well as notes from the webinar. So thank you so much, Ruth, for another great webinar.
Thank you, Grace. It's been fun working with you.
Absolutely. You too.